Hi everyone, so you all know I do my new moon videos after a new moon. So for all my new subscribers, please know that and note that. And I don't believe that you lose anything by seeing this video after the new moon in Leo. The last two videos I did, both on Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde, talked about this new moon. So what is most relevant about this new moon? The fact that it trines the North Node in Aries still applies. And that is the most important part of it. And indeed, well, let me dive in. There are, first and foremost, and this a lot of you have heard me say before, but it's always helpful to check in 48 to 72 hours before a new moon. Dead, flat, almost hopeless seeming energy, exhaustion, tired, sometimes sick, some needing to rest, needing to sleep, sleeping easily, which is not true when you're dealing with a full moon, for example. So certainly coming into the new moon, which occurred around 2:38 a.m. today, and I'm doing this about 12 hours after the new moon. And a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of optimism certainly enters the picture. Now, there are theories. A lot of people do affirmations related to the new moon for the next 4 weeks, and typically you will do it for the sign of Leo and where Leo falls in your chart, what house it occupies and what that house stands for. You certainly, I'm going to leave it to each of you to determine what your rituals are around a new moon, if you follow any rituals. Between the time of the new moon and 14 days later, the full moon, the size of the moon amplifies. More and more of the moon is opposed by the sun, is visible to the sun, is spotlit by the sun. And the moon, in certain traditions, and I think that there's truth to this, is the body that the most stands for us. The sun, I find, increasingly stands for source and our connection to source, and that part of us that has this very totally clean and unsullied connection to source. Source shines into us through the sun. I'll expand on this, I think, in my next video, where I want to wrap up some of what I said with the Mercury and Venus retrograde, because on Sunday, this past Sunday, Venus conjuncted the sun. And when a planet is retrograde like Venus and Mercury, when they're retrograde, they will eventually conjunct the sun, and that date or that milestone is really important. The moon, I find, at least energetically, and that's also a strange word because energy is a word we would put onto Mars. And that's right. But for us, in our day-to-day egoic selves, our personality selves, in the way that we're reacting to things, dealing with things, giving things energy, managing them, dealing with them intuitively and emotionally, I would say the two planets that stand the most for us are the moon and Mercury. Mercury for the mind and how we process information here, but the moon in general as we conduct ourselves in our day-to-day lives. So 48 to 72 hours before a new moon, certainly 24 hours, but a flatness, the moon is diminishing in size and it reduces to total darkness. And then the new moon occurs where it is conjunct the sun and the sun blocks it out. But here's the deal. Actually, this is as good a time as any to be talking about conjuncting the sun and the moon. A planet, when it conjuncts the sun, in some traditions is considered to be combust. Technically, it loses power. When it is at its most visible, often being opposite the sun, it has, in some traditions, a lot of power, a lot of energy. So with the new moon, our energy, our emotional energy, our ability to deal with things on a day-to-day basis is diminished or reduced or exhausted. A month is over. The word month being derived from a moon, from the moon. And indeed, when the new moon happens, a new month starts. 28 days, 14 days speaking to a full moon, and then another 14 days going back down to the next new moon and a new month starting. When a planet is conjunct the sun, when it reduces to nothing, when it is burning off a past cycle, it could be said to be in conversation with Source. You want to call it God, you want to call it Spirit, you want to call it the universe, you want to call it that part of us, our spirit. I tend to think of the sun as very much happening on a subconscious level. The word subconscious, though, again, can be defined in different ways. For some people, it is a much more primitive thing. And I choose to think of it as a primitive thing too, but not primitive as in reactive, but primitive as in unconditioned. And there's a download, there's a conversation between the sun, Source, the managing principle, that part of our lives that we experience as somehow being in control and actually observing things, the wisest part of ourselves, connected to Source, Source ultimately being the conductor and the distributor and the manifester of things. There's a conversation that occurs between the planet that is conjunct the sun and the sun. There's a download. And as a planet diminishes in size, it gives up some of its energy to have this conversation with the sun. And then it happens. And then as the moon starts to expand, it starts the next month after this infusion, with this knowledge, with this conversation, with this sense of what needs to happen next, what needs to be tackled next, what needs the next kind of energy in a conscious way, as opposed to a subconscious way, to go about and take care of things and do them. One of the tools that can accurately predict where a lot of time and energy and manifestation is occurring is, of course, where the moon is in your chart as it transits. So if the moon is in Leo right now, moving into Virgo soon, and then in Virgo for another 2.5 days, and so on and so forth, where these signs are in your chart and what house they occupy are one area where you might find, if you actually take a look at this and study it and pay attention to it, may well tell you where you are conducting your conversation and your combat and your goal pursuit and your tackling of tasks vis-a-vis the real sort of 3D world, the real 3D world. Another tool that is very useful, and this is more for astrology aficionados and experts, is of course your lunar return. When the moon is going around your chart and it conjuncts where your natal moon is, that creates your lunar return, which again is a chart for the next 28 days. And I find a lunar return is very helpful and really quite accurate in giving you a sense of what the next 28 days are about. And as the moon goes through different parts of your lunar return chart, in conjunction with where the moon is in your birth chart, can really give you a sense of where a lot of attention and energy is going on any given day or series or sequences of day. So a new moon occurs, and the moon starts another 28-day journey, renewed, refreshed, having had this conversation. If you really pay attention, clear about what needs to happen next, and if you pay even more attention, marvelously, what needs to happen next may well have a lot to do with where the new moon occurs in your chart. So where is Leo? Where does Leo sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? And what does that house stand for? And what is your agenda related to that house for the next 28 days? Right now, new moons are happening close to the end of a sign, right? So this new moon, I think, is happening, at 23 degrees or something like that? They're 30 degrees. So a lot of the transits, Mars has already gone through Leo, it is in Virgo. Mercury's already gone through Leo, it is in Virgo. Venus would have gone through Leo, but it went retrograde, so Venus is retrograde in Leo. The sun in 5 days' time, 6 days' time, will enter Virgo, in a week's time, actually. So the planets are, and a lot of people, when we talk about Leo season, refer to the solar calendar, which, has its uses, but I use it much more just to be in alignment administratively with how the world runs by the solar calendar. For me, Leo season, or any season, really starts when the new moon occurs in a particular part of the chart. And if you were to pay attention, and if you were to think about even the last 23 odd days, when the sun has been in Leo and we've technically been in Leo season, you might find that if you reflect upon it, that a lot of the energy has been Cancerian. And by that I mean, where does Cancer sit in your chart? What house does it occupy, and what does that house stand for? Because until the Leo new moon occurred about 12 hours ago, we were still in the Cancer new moon cycle. It doesn't matter that for much of the last 28 days, there have been no planets in Cancer. Venus is in Leo, the Sun has been in Leo, Mercury in Virgo, Mars in Virgo. Cancer is totally clear. But prior to this morning's new moon, 28 days ago, the new moon was in Cancer. So we were really in Cancer season. And if you really reflect on your chart and where the sign of Cancer sits in your chart and what house it occupies, and I use whole signs, WHOLE, whole sign houses. Again, I don't want to get into an argument with what is right and what is wrong. I'm just letting you know what I use. For anyone that makes sense to, that's what. So if there's a time to act in conjunction with the Leo part of your chart, now it is. And some traditions believe that it's as the moon starts to appear as the first crescent. So it takes about a day and a half, is when that energy can really return. I feel and I find that after a new moon, I do feel a greater sense of optimism and hope, and I'm ready to take on what is next. Whereas for the 48 to 72 hours before, I really have to watch my mood, because a certain amount of hopelessness and depression and flatness, tiredness comes in. And I find that to be true, just kind of objectively as I observe it. But a recovery from that certainly starts with the new moon. Well, this new moon trines the North Node, which is, for all intents and purposes, excuse me, I'm recovering from a cough. It's the last 72 hours I have been sick, and it's not COVID. As I've mentioned in my last couple of videos, which are worth looking at if you have not looked at them, the Mercury retrograde and the Venus retrograde, both the Leo new moon and 28 days from today, the Virgo new moon, are marvelously affirming, forward-looking new moons. The new moon in Leo trines the North Node. The new moon in Virgo trines Uranus in Taurus. And these are wonderful transits. The new moon in Virgo opposes Neptune as well. And so these themes of the planets in Virgo, Mars and Mercury, first opposing Saturn, then trining Jupiter and Uranus, and then opposing Neptune, are one of the themes that we have explored, certainly when we've talked about the Mercury retrograde video. It's a theme that continues, where the planets in Virgo support the activity in Taurus, Jupiter and Uranus, looking ahead to the lunar eclipse on October 28th in that sign, the last of the North Node eclipses in that sign. So there's something constructive there. At the same time, they look to vulnerabilities in the Pisces part of our chart since 2014, 15, 16, and actively seek to put some sort of plan of action to manage them, to heal them. What that healing looks like and how it can come up is part of a separate conversation that we'll address as we move into the new moon in Virgo a month from now, but even other conversations we have regarding Mercury retrograde. The planets that are in Leo support the North Node, but prior to doing so, square Jupiter and Uranus. And Venus, of course, stands to square Jupiter and Uranus 3 times, once when it was direct, now retrograde, and then direct again. And indeed, trines Chiron in Aries. So the planets in Leo, supporting Chiron in Aries, supporting now the North Node in Aries, as this new moon does, and challenging what needs to be done in the sign of Leo to continue to support what Jupiter and Uranus are trying to do in the sign of Taurus, creating a new beginning and move you to a more authentic way of being in the sign of Taurus and where Taurus sits in your chart, and looking ahead to the October 28th lunar eclipse in Taurus as well. Okay. When a new moon trines the north node, there's support to the direction that the universe wants you to move in. Some of the North Node energy, we can't ignore what is going on in the sign of Taurus. The North Node has moved into Aries, and that is what we need to look at. But as far as the sign of Taurus is concerned, there's still further manifestation, further energy, further activity that we need to pour ourselves into through October 28th to finish up those North Node eclipses, to work in partnership with Jupiter, trying to create a new beginning in a new 12-13 year cycle and end a 12-13 cycle in the Taurus part of our chart, and assist Uranus in continuing to make us more authentic in that part of our chart, as Uranus has been doing over the past 6 or 7 or 8 years, since 2018, 5 years. Great. But there's a handoff this year in the North Node moving from Taurus to Aries. And we had the first of the Aries North Node eclipses around April the 19th. Well, now the North Node has actually moved into Aries, and this new moon trines the North Node in Aries. So while we focus on North Node, full moon lunar eclipse manifestations and energy in Taurus, and 2 months before October 28th, August 28th, so between August 21st coming up shortly and the end of the first week of September, we may have significant developments occur that connect to and relate to that October 28th lunar eclipse. So very shortly, and certainly during this 28-day period, some of our energy very soon is going to go towards that October 28th eclipse, keeping the week before August 28th and week after August 28th in mind as a time when developments related to the October 28th eclipse can occur. Manifestations can occur, culminations can occur in such a way that by the time October 28th comes along, these culminations have taken root, and the October 28th eclipse may produce no event, but the events may actually, that the eclipse is trying to create, for some of us, may actually occur the week before and after August 28th. But also when an eclipse changes signs, we are called upon, especially with this new moon, to pay attention to what the Aries eclipses are going to be trying to tell us and are trying to tell us. The first of these new moons that is actually clear in terms of moving forward is the Libra new moon solar eclipse that occurs in the middle of October. By that time, no planet, none of the personal planets are retrograde. One of the challenges with this Leo new moon, which is so forward-looking and so forward-moving, is that the backdrop is actually really one of treading water. Venus is retrograde. Mercury is soon, by Sunday, by the 20th. I'm going to start to consider it retrograde stationary by then. It starts its retrograde period on the 23rd of August. And by the time we get to the next new moon in Virgo, 28 days from today, Mercury again is truly stationary, getting ready to go direct the next day. So both the Leo new moon and the Virgo new moon, as forward-looking as they are stymied by other astrological energies that are encouraging us not to sign on the dotted line, or at least to understand that until the end of September, because a lot of the planets clear their shadow periods by the end of September, and certainly after the middle of October is when things will start to gallop forward and move forward. And this creates a certain impatience, and one of the characteristic feelings of this time is one of frustration and impatience, and of things not showing up. If they're showing up, they may seem like, is this really it, and is this what I want? And of course, it's a call for patience and for things to work out behind the scenes, and to let a retrograde Venus and to let a retrograde Mercury do its job, do their jobs. And a retrograde Venus has already done the bulk of its job through last Sunday when it conjuncted the Sun. Really made us think about, what are you doing about how you're managing your money and your relationships when you consider where it is that you want to go and what you want to manifest and what sits in your heart. The Mercury retrograde is going to bring further revelations so that you can have a sense of where it is that what needs to be adjusted and what you really want to commit to and what you don't. So it's very important right now to observe, to show up for opportunities, as I've said, and to observe where things are going and how they're manifesting and what is playing out, and to keep your compass very close to what it is that you really want to have work with you and work for you, and what it is that you work on. What is your heart's design? What is your vision? And what is it that you want for yourself? And where it is that you're feeling drawn to move towards. Because the new moon in Leo and the new moon in Virgo, again, continue to bring developments, but there's also the other general energy of the time that calls upon us to continue to evolve our relationship with our sense of self-worth and how we're going to use our resources to support us and our relationships to support us, with the Venus retrograde continuing till September the 4th. At least after September the 4th, Venus will go direct, but that's still another 18 days away. And with the upcoming Mercury retrograde till September the 15th, really, it is time to kind of not sign the dotted line, ideally. Or if you sign the dotted line, look over things 3 or 4 times. And if you're going to do some kind of work, active projects between Venus retrograde or Mercury retrograde, know that after the retrograde ends, your thoughts about them or their importance in your life may shift, may change. More about the Mercury and Venus retrogrades in those videos that I just did, the last 2 videos, and the next video that I'm going to do. Coming back to the new moon in Leo. After everything that has been going on in Taurus and continues to going on in Taurus, and I will still maintain that it is the eclipse in Taurus that should take one of our 2 primary priorities right now. One of our priorities should be aiding Pluto in Capricorn to complete its transformation in the Capricorn part of our chart in the second half of this year. The second area should be pouring ourselves into the Taurus part of our chart to finish up whatever we feel needs to be finished up by October 28th, paying respect to the eclipses that have occurred in the Taurus part of our chart since September, October of 2021. But the question comes up, as the eclipses move from Taurus to Aries, what are we next supposed to focus on? And there's something about this new moon in Leo that starts to answer that question. It certainly provides an opportunity to answer that question. Part of the reason why we might be dealing with these retrogrades is to make sure that as we move forward into whatever ship or plane we're meant to board by the middle of October, whatever plane or ship we're meant to board by the middle of October, that it is an alignment not only with the Taurus eclipse on October 28th, but also where the Aries North Node activities and eclipses are going to encourage us to go. And that means that certain things are going to have to go bye-bye, and a certain door or 2 certain doors or certain doors will be the ones that we're meant to walk through. The biggest challenge for us right now is to not let our impatience and a desire to have something manifest and concrete mess with Spirit's plan about what it is that we're meant to walk through. And certainly, since July the 23rd to August the 13th, when the Sun conjuncted Venus, it would be worth it for us to pay attention to, and with Venus retrograde, this examination of our relationship with our vision for where it is that we want to go, and our sense of self-worth around managing our resources and managing our relationships, and which relationships are really for us and which circumstances are for us or not, remains very, very important as a touchstone, a guide with regard to how we're going to pick and which opportunities are going to pick us and which opportunities we are going to pick. So it's okay, I guess the tussle with this new moon and also with the new moon in Virgo. The first question is, what plane am I going to board by the middle of October? The second question is, what planning do I need to do and what do I need to execute and have in place by the time I get to the middle of October? Now, for some people, this boarding plane thing might be much more of an end September thing, but irrespective, I'm going to keep sticking with the middle of October right now. First question, what plane am I boarding? Second question, how do I need to think of and what needs to be in place so that I can board this plane? And I really think that those are the questions that are being answered for us. And the forward-looking nature of the Leo new moon and the Virgo new moon 28 days from now helps answer the first and the second of those questions. Certainly the second of those questions, what needs to be in place, the Mercury retrograde will really help with. But we still need the answer to the first question. And it may well be that this Leo new moon cycle over the next 4 weeks continues to provide opportunities, direction, thought. I think the word that comes to my mind with this Leo new moon is thought-provoking. And I mean that with regard to everything that you have learned over the past couple of years with the Taurus eclipses. What has it taught you about where you want to go next with the Aries eclipses? Where does Aries sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? And what are the lessons that can be carried over from developments in the Taurus part of your chart over the past 2 years that now allow you to set some sort of a goal or some sort of a vision or some sort of a tightrope walk or some sort of a light at the end of the tunnel in the Aries part of your chart that you're going to move towards? And this really varies. If, for example, you're Libra rising and the eclipse is moving from the 8th to the 7th house, well, are you going to follow through now on that divorce, or are you going to pop the question, follow through on that marriage? This is a very general thing. So, but it's not going to apply to every single person that's Libra rising. But, for a lot of people, it's a fair question. Committed partnerships and sharing of resources, and whether you're going to be merging your life with another person or another party, business, but also personal strongly, or whether the last couple of years have been a meditation on whether you need to separate from someone, you're now in line to put that in action. So when you have a Leo new moon like this, part of what you have to start thinking about and considering is what is going to come up over the next 4 weeks that allows you to, that makes you think about, which way am I going to go? And where am I going? And which door am I opening? And where am I headed? I think the example that I gave, some of that is already clear, but irrespective, it's time to move towards and give some consideration to the Libra part to the Aries part of our chart, where we can. I'm trying to think of other examples. If you're a Leo rising, moving from the 10th to the 9th house, what is it that you have learned with regard to career-related developments over the past 2 years that are making you rethink and look at your vision for your life and your career? And what do you want to change? What do you want to shift? How have the eclipses over the past couple of years in the career part of the chart made you revisit your goals? Sometimes getting to a certain point in your career part of the chart makes you realize what you like about it and what you don't like about it. Sometimes getting to where you want to be, so to speak, gives you a sense of what it is actually like to be there. And then you realize that life is not a static or permanent thing. And so you are surprised to find that your own goals or how you're developing your life journey may change. New goals may emerge, new directions may emerge that you want to consider that feel right and authentic to you. That feel right and authentic to you in conversation with the Jupiter and Uranus transits in the Taurus part of the chart, but are also very much in line with the Aries North Node development. They're working hand in hand, and that is the point. This new moon in Leo's conversation with the North Node in Aries, working hand in hand with the Taurus eclipse and Jupiter in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus, and but the final decision making is still yet to come, is still yet to. More clarity and more opportunities may emerge. More doors may show up that you need to knock on over the next 4 weeks, even the next 2 weeks, that continue to prompt this question, that continue to remain vigilant around which doors are in front of you and which doors you need to knock on. Which door will open? Which door will it be? But don't be in too much of a rush to close any of the doors just yet, because we've got to let the Mercury retrograde cycle play out before Mercury goes direct on September the 15th. So certainly by after September 18th or so, we're free to be signing things and have our clarity or whatever it is and be making decisions. So it may be that it's really around that time in the second half of September that we really feel clear about which direction we're going in. And by that time, we already will be acting on the inklings and the information, sometimes disappointing, we might get about certain opportunities that help us determine which doors will remain closed and which doors what we will release and let go of, and which direction we want to go in, and what relationship that has with the Taurus and the Aries part of our chart, because life keeps moving and the circle keeps moving and the chart keeps moving. And we start moving after September the 18th to board that flight by the middle of October. Maybe the end of September for some, but by the middle of October. And 2 weeks later, then we have the Taurus eclipse. Now, at the time of this new moon, there are 3 other transits that are encoded into it, very much in keeping with what we're talking about. Mars is in Virgo, pursuing goals, taking action, protecting your boundaries, participating in conflict that protects your boundaries and allows you to move towards your goals. In the sign of Virgo. Where does Virgo sit? What does it stand for? Mars opposes Neptune. What plan of action do you need to take to clean up, end murkiness, gaslighting, theft, deceit, leaks, loss in the Pisces part of your chart? Some of these themes have been going on since 2014, 15, 16. Mars also, and this is the closest transit at the time of this new moon, because it has already occurred. The new moon occurred, and a few hours after that, Mars trined Uranus from Virgo. Somewhere over the next 4 weeks, we are going to be taking some action towards becoming more authentic in the Taurus part of our chart, and it will be in partnership with the new beginning that Jupiter is trying to create in the Taurus part of our chart, and this relationship between the Taurus and the Aries part of our chart as the North Node has switched signs. And the action may well come from the Virgo part of our chart. All of this is working together. The third transit that is getting ready to occur, but is encoded into this new moon, is Venus retrograde in Leo squaring Jupiter. Now Venus, once it's direct, is going to square Jupiter and square Uranus again. So this is an ongoing conversation from the sign of Leo with a retrograde Venus rebuilding its connection with our sense of self-worth and our sense of vision and values with regard to where it is that we want to go and what we want to manifest and what is in our heart and what do we ideally want to build. Reflecting on our relationships actively, reflecting on how we're managing our resources actively, and how taking these actions in the Leo part of our chart may benefit and may be necessary for Jupiter to be able to create its new beginning in the Taurus part of our chart. It's a ripe, fruity moon, ripe with opportunity, and yet, it is not time to put pen to paper and sign the dotted line until 3 or 4 days after the Virgo new moon, a month from now. In summary, I don't even want to talk about the rulership because we know the sun rules this new moon and the sun is actively involved in the new moon and the sun is in Leo. Leo season starts now. What actions do you feel motivated to, and intuitively do you feel like this new moon is going to guide you to take now that the new moon has occurred and conjuncted the sun, and as the new moon turns into a crescent and starts to gather and gain more and more energy? And so fascinating, we're in the cycle where the full moon occurs in the sign that's related to the next new moon. So the new moon occurs in Leo, but the full moon is going to occur in Pisces 2 weeks from now. And remember, we've just talked about the correlation between taking actions from the Virgo part of our chart with Mars and Mercury to manage, to take seriously and to heal and to manage the Pisces part of our chart. Another thing about this new moon, the corresponding full moon for this new moon happened 2 weeks before this new moon when we had the Aquarius full moon 2 weeks ago. Think back to that Aquarius full moon and what you learned and what visibility you may have gotten towards what forces are blocking from the Aquarius part of your chart Jupiter from being able to create a new beginning. What actions need to be taken related to the Aquarius part of your chart to allow Jupiter to create its new 12-13-year cycle and an auspicious new beginning in the Taurus part of your chart? Think about that, because this new moon may give you the energy to act in that direction. Opportunity is encoded in this new moon, and opportunities that could be very karmic, very destined, very important for the next right opportunity. Right insofar as it is related to the North Node eclipse in Taurus on October 28th, with August 28th, the week before, week after, playing an important role in events, culminations, signs related to that eclipse. Jupiter being in Taurus, creating a new beginning, a new 12-13-year cycle, an auspicious new beginning there, getting ready to go retrograde on September 4th when Venus goes direct. More on that later. And Uranus in Taurus since 2018, I believe, making us more authentic in that part of the chart. So, and even more importantly, the new moon is trine the North Node in Aries. So ripe with opportunity, the right kind of opportunity that supports the Taurus and, even more importantly, the Aries part of your chart. And it is that Aries part of your chart that provides the guide, the lens through which you will be able to identify what these next right, what will feel right, and in alignment with everything that is going on with the Venus retrograde and the Mercury retrograde. It may surprise some of you that the things that may have come up while the North Node was in Taurus, and that may have felt like projects or things, and particularly they came up while Venus were retrograde or Mercury were retrograde. Those kinds of developments, all of a sudden, some of you might find, and you've really got to test this for yourself, you might find that they have kind of run their course. And those things that you thought would be the directions of the projects that you might be working on, where you had hopes that they would be part of your future, you might realize that they've served their purpose. And you are much more inclined to pursue projects and work and topics in a direction that are absolutely in line with the Taurus part of your chart, but are also much more in line with the Aries part of your chart, that are taking what you have learned with these eclipses of the past 2 years in the Taurus part of your chart, and are enlivening and changing and modifying where you want to go, building on these last 2 years eclipses by honoring now the Aries part of your chart where the North Node is, and where we had the first North Node eclipse in April 19th. So you might find, to your surprise, as you look at these different doors, you might find that certain doors that you were thinking were the doors that you would be going through don't end up being the doors you go through. But the doors you actually end up going through and that feel right for you may be much more connected to the space that you've been occupying recently around. It could be that certain things that occurred when the Taurus eclipses were occurring that may have provided progress and learning, but may have ultimately been disappointing, have been putting you in a mind space recently around where you want to go and what have they taught you and how do you, that this is the important thing to think about. What do you want? What feels right for you? Everything you've learned over the past couple of years, what direction is it putting you in? And see if this new moon in Leo doesn't bring about some opportunity over the next 4 weeks that makes you feel like, that's the direction I want to move in. You might find yourself saying no to or minimizing certain projects that have been in play over the past 2 years, knowing in your heart of hearts that for some reason they have served their purpose and actually brought you to a point where you can move forward in a way that starts to move you towards where you actually want to go, which is based to some extent on everything you've learned over the past 2 years and how you want to create that new beginning in the Taurus part of your chart and your own authentic path in the Taurus part of your chart that also honors where the Aries eclipses are taking you. But, final point, it may not feel like it is the time to finally commit to this and that you're very much part of this process. So there's an important duality here. Show up and try to create opportunities by all means. And certainly till the end of this week, if there are pending actions that you feel you need to take connected to the Taurus part of your chart, especially as they're related to communication, do it. After August the 20th, and especially after August the 23rd, it's time to let things kind of finish up and let things come up for revelation, as Mercury remains retrograde for 3 weeks till the middle of September. I would be less eager, but if opportunities are coming up, show up for every opportunity, whatever that means to you, whether it is projects at work or jobs or interviews or whatever this opportunity is that feels in alignment, show up for them. But there's also a need to show up for them to the best of your ability. By all means, do your best. But we're sort of in this classic Hindu idea of, and it's been adapted, of course, to go in and do your best and detach from the outcome. Because let the planetary activities then, if it's out of your control at that point in time, help manage the right outcome. Because it really isn't time. It's time to show up for things, but it's not time to close the deals yet. Because ideally, we will close the deal or deals after September the 18th. After September the 4th, once Venus is direct, we might find that we have a clearer sense of the direction we want to go in. And by that time, what the Mercury retrograde is trying to bring to our attention has been brought to our attention, often a little painfully, because the revelations are things that we were not aware of and sometimes can be disappointing. But the opportunity to move in a direction that is right for us, the right opportunity, is certainly, let's just say that the universe is playing a game with us and for us and saying, with this new moon, I'm going to introduce the idea of the next right opportunity. So show up for everything, but don't, and be in observation mode as the planets, Venus and Mercury, remain retrograde. But don't be in such a rush to try to remain more in alignment with your own internal dialogue of where things need to go and what they need to be. And what feels right for you. And don't be in such a haste to try and close the deal just yet. And I mean, September the 18th is not that far away. We're talking another month. Okay, I will leave it at this. If you found it useful, share it. Go ahead and mention my channel to your friends or whoever. Subscribe to my channel. And when you click the subscribe button, there'll be a wiggly bell on top. Please feel free to click that. So you're notified when I do new videos. If you comment and like the video, it gives it more circulation. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel.